Hi, I'm Professor Tom McPhail. I teach a global communication course at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and for the first time we will be offering it through continuing education as an internet web-based course. And what I'd like to do now is walk you through what the course is going to be about. Let's start. The textbook is a global communication. It is my book, and it is published by Blackwell, and I suggest you buy it used at Amazon.com. In terms of the course itself, there are 13 chapters in the textbook, and those 13 chapters then will inform 13 lectures which will be available on the internet. Basically, in Chapter 1, we have two major theories that continue throughout the textbook. The first theory is by Emanuel Wallerstein, and it is world system theory. This theory is an economic-based theory that divides the world into three economic spheres: the core nations, which tend to be the industrialized nations of the world, dominated by the U.S., the European Union, and Japan; the semi-peripheral nations such as Mexico and the Nordic countries; and peripheral nations. And the peripheral nations are really described as third world nations, or the southern hemisphere, or less developed nations. And of course, the media are very prevalent and very rich in the core nations, and in terms of the peripheral nations, they're very hard to find. In fact, it's estimated that half the people in the world have yet to use a telephone. The other theory is called electronic colonialism theory. It's a theory I developed, and it deals with the impact of mass media messages on the mind. And we will, of course, throughout the semester, provide a lot more information and detail on that particular theory. The second major aspect of what the course looks at will be a series of large events or corporations, such as the British Broadcasting Corporation. It is an internationally based radio, television, and internet network, and it has had a huge influence around the world, because wherever the British colonies went, so went the BBC, which is a public service model. The model in the United States evolved totally differently as a commercial model, whereas in other nations it's a public service model. We'll also look at what is called the New World Information and Communication Order. This was a debate over the free flow of information and many other aspects of global mass media trends and impact that took place primarily in the halls of UNESCO in the 1970s and 1980s. It became so contentious, both the US and the UK withdrew from UNESCO. They have both since returned. We'll also look at a television network called CNN, founded by Ted Turner. CNN, there's almost an entire chapter on that particular broadcasting network, because it was the first global all-news network, and even today is clearly a major player in terms of global communication. We'll also take a look at what is called development communication. Development communication is about the third world and attempts to use the media to improve the social, economic, and cultural life in the third world. We will then look at, in two separate segments, American conglomerates in the mass media field. And just to give you highlights, there's of course Time Warner, largest communication conglomerate in the world. They also happen to own CNN. There's Disney Corporation, started by Walter Disney, that has such major properties as ABC Television Network in the US, ESPN. They also are a major stakeholder in Euro Disney outside of Paris, and that is the largest tourist destination in Europe today. So it's an important global player. We look at Viacom. Viacom owns CBS network in the United States. It also owns MTV. We'll spend a fair amount of time on MTV because teenagers around the world are impacted by MTV, and of course mostly the English language music that is on MTV. We cannot ignore News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch's giant, because they're a huge player in Europe. They're a big player in the United States, and recently, of course, they acquired the Wall Street Journal, which gives them further influence in the global media scene. We'll also pick up some new players, such as Walmart. Walmart is the largest seller of DVDs in the world. And so, given its rapid global expansion, we'll have to take it into consideration in terms of global mass media. In terms of non-U.S. stakeholders, we'll deal with Bertelsmann in Germany, which is a major player not only in Germany but also in the United States because it owns a number of properties here. We will look at Sony Corporation of Japan, Sony Pictures, Sony Books, as well as Sony Technology. So it is a major global player, currently headed by, interestingly enough, a British gentleman, not a Japanese person. We'll look at the concept of telenovelas. Telenovelas are basically Latin America soap operas that are now globally exported. And they've had a huge impact around the world, and in fact there is now in the United States a drama on ABC called Ugly Betty, and that is a direct takeoff from the Spanish telenovelas in Latin America. We'll look at Euronews. Euronews was created after the first Gulf War to present a European perspective on the news, since only CNN covered the first Persian War. We'll also look at BBC World Television Service because it is a global competitor to CNN. It's also advertising based, and we'll look at some of the implications then of the two global networks, All News, which are CNN and BBC World Television Service. There are other topics we'll examine through the course. The wire services are very important. There are two major wire services left today, those being Associated Press and Reuters. There's now a new player in terms of photography, Getty Images. We'll look at that. We'll look at the impact of Hollywood, American feature films. Currently, American feature films, they spend almost $100 million marketing them around the world. And thus, it is very difficult for other nations to compete with Hollywood productions, the blockbusters. Many nations can't even afford $100 million for a single film, yet $100 million to market a film that may have cost $300 million to make. So the scale and the issues of globalization are very prevalent in Hollywood. We look at global advertising, which of course goes with the global mass media. We'll take a look at UNESCO, which was very active in the in the NUICO debates, and currently with ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, is getting involved in future cultural conventions, and we'll get into details of what that debate is about. We'll look at Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera, of course, is the Arab-based television network that has come to prominence since 9/11. We'll also, there's a chapter on the internet, but we'll also take a look at the internet itself and the implications of the internet for global broadcasting. So that's a quick overview of the course.